Well, pick up a 12 pack and welcome to a 20-hour overnight journey to deliciousness. Welcome back to Smoked Meat with Jeff. Today, or should I say over the next 2 days, we are going to be turning a 13-pound beef brisket into some just amazing food, nice and tender for dinner tomorrow afternoon. So make sure you have plenty of cocktails on hand or a nice 12-pack of something, because this is going to take a while. So let's get to some of the basic ingredients and how we're going to go ahead and prepare this brisket to turn it into a nice smoked beef brisket. Okay, to make this happen, you're going to need just a couple of real basic non-food ingredients. You're going to need a large roasting pan, lots of aluminum foil, a basting syringe for injecting flavor into the meat, and a very sharp knife because we're going to do a little bit of trimming on our brisket before we get started. And then as far as your food ingredients go, you're going to need, non-food, you're going to need something for doing a little bit of mixing in. And then food ingredients, you're going to need 3 cans. These are 14.5-ounce cans of beef broth. You're going to need 3 of those. You're going to need about half a bottle of Worcestershire Sauce. And get out a good supply of whatever your favorite mixes or seasoning is going to be. I'm going to be going with my homemade sweet and spicy rub here. You want to go with something that's got a very fine texture to it so that you can dissolve it fully into some beef broth for the injection process. So if you have a spice grinder dedicated to just grinding up your spices, go ahead and use that to really powder this stuff up. And then of course you're going to need a beef brisket. I'm going to go with a whole beef brisket today. You want to get what's called a untrimmed Packers brisket. So it's going to have all of the fat on it and untrimmed, so you want everything in there so we can get this prepped for throwing on the smoker. Now, since this is going to be an overnight process, I'm going to start smoking at about 10 o'clock tonight, so it's going to be dark. So there's not going to be a lot of cutscenes showing what's going on the smoker, because it'll just be too darn dark to film, because I'm going to be up pretty much all night making this happen. So I'm going to start cooking at 10 o'clock tonight for a dinner time of 6 p.m. tomorrow, and of course I'm going to have some guests over to help me consume this bad boy. But the smoking process is going to be broken into 2 basic parts, and I'll go over that as we're doing the prep work on this in the next step. Alright, just getting some spices ready there. So, brisket. A lot of people are intimidated by being able to make a really good brisket, and I'm here to tell you, don't be intimidated by it. It just takes a really long time. There's a bunch of different methods for smoking brisket to get varying results, but I'm going to be doing it on extremely low temperature for a really long time, because this is how you're going to cook it to get a really tender and just fall apart brisket. So I've got the brisket here. I have went ahead and I've trimmed it so that the top side I'm exposing as much meat as possible. So I really just took off a good strip of fat there, and that just goes away. We are going to leave all of the fat on the bottom side of our brisket, and you're going to put this fat side down. Just go ahead and throw it right into your pan for right now. And then we're going to inject this about every 2 inches or so in a nice little grid pattern using our syringe. And I've got a full can of the beef broth with about 4 tablespoons of my mix in here. And we're just going to keep that mixed up, fill up our syringe, and if you clog your syringe, that just means that you just didn't grind up your spices enough. Go in at about a 45-degree angle to about the middle of the meat and just inject a little bit and back out your needle as you do that. Do that every 2 inches in a grid pattern until you've gotten the entire thing injected with your marinade. So I'm going to work on this for a little while. Because this is going to be an overnight process, I'm not going to be doing a bunch of jump scenes showing you the progress. But how the process works is we're going to set our smoker to about 200 to 250 degrees. Keep it between those two marks there, closer to the 200 range if you can. And we're going to, once this is done, we are going to put our brisket onto the smoker for somewhere between 6 and 8 hours directly on the grate with the fat cap down. So we're going to smoke it leaving the door closed as much as you possibly can, just to keep that low heat in there. After about 6 to 8 hours, we will take this thing out and we will put it back into our roasting pan, fat side down. And then you go ahead and you take your other 2 cans of beef broth and whatever is left over from this one, and you're going to pour it into the pan just to get a couple of inches of marinade in here. Feel free to add some more of your spices to that mix as well. Then you're going to take the whole thing, wrap this in foil, put it back onto the smoker, and then put a meat probe in it, and it is going to sit on your smoker until we hit 195 to 200 degrees at the internal temperature at its thickest part. And at that point, then we can pull it off the smoker. So this is going to take forever. You can count on about 1.5 hours of cook time per pound of brisket that you're creating. So I've got a 13-pounder here, so I'm looking at around 20 hours total time, which includes cook time. And then when we get to the end, we are going to let this rest in a cooler, which I forgot to mention. Some of the other non-food ingredients you need is you're going to need a large cooler and some towels and of course some more foil, because you don't pull this thing off the smoker and then start eating it right away. You're going to let it rest. So I'm going to continue to inject this for a little bit, and then we'll be back and I will show you what the final step is for prepping this before we put it onto the smoker, which is actually really easy. And then it's just a matter of staying up all night and babysitting our smoker. All right, I am almost done getting a full can of beef broth and spices into my brisket. And word of warning, when you're using this this meat injector, chances are you're going to get a little bit of this juice squirting back at you as you're going along. So have some glasses or something handy. So now that I've got this completely injected in there for some extra flavor, I'm just going to take some of my spices and liberally coat the whole thing. Typically you'll see me do olive oil or mustard to get the spices to stick, but because I've been injecting so much juice into this thing, the top of this is really wet, so no need to use mustard or olive oil. And at this point you're just going to put a very, very liberal coat of spices on this whole thing. This is my sweet and spicy homemade rub. Maybe at some point I'll make this available for sale or for purchase online if you guys want to give my proprietary secret recipe a try. But get this coated, then I'm going to cover it with foil, and I'm actually going to throw this back into the refrigerator because, like I said, I'm not going to be firing up my smoker and putting this on until 10 o'clock tonight, which means 6 to 8 hours later, so 4 to 6 o'clock in the morning is when I'm going to take this thing out, transfer it back into this pan, add my other 2 cans of beef broth, or whatever it takes to get about 2 inches of liquid in the bottom, and some more of my spices. Cover it in foil, and then it's going to just slow roast for many, many hours with a meat probe in it until we get to internal temperature of 195 to 200 degrees. I'm going to be smoking with cherry wood today. It's really up to you as to what type of wood you want to use with this. Just go with a hardwood. Hickory, oak is actually really good for this. Cherry, pecan, or even almond wood works really well for this. So I got a nice coating on there. You can see it's starting to, the liquid's starting to really make this stick. So I will see you probably at sunup after this has been on the smoker for many hours, and we'll move on from there. Well, it is now day 2. And like I said, last night I started cooking at 10 p.m. And at around 6 o'clock this morning, I think it was closer to 6:30, I pulled the entire slab of meat off, and then I put it back into the pan, as I'll show you what we got going here. Put it back into the pan, and then added my beef broth seasoning and Worcestershire sauce, covered it with foil, and put it back into the smoker. So let's take a look at what we've got here. Now, doesn't that look amazing? At this point, you can see I've got a bunch of liquid in here. This is liquid that has that I added to it, as well as came out of the meat itself, so it's cooking in its own juices. And then now's the time to grab a toothpick and just start poking around. And if you can put the toothpick in and it just goes in with no effort at all, you know that you're getting pretty close to being done. If it's it gives you a little bit of resistance, you're going to go ahead and cover this thing back up, put it back into the smoker, and go for another half an hour. And then you just keep checking on it every half an hour after that. Of course, after it's been in the smoker for a number of hours. So 6:30 this morning, wrapped in foil, put back into the smoker, and now it has been here. We are coming up on almost 3 o'clock in the afternoon. My target time to pull it off is at 4 o'clock, and that's when we're going to move to the next step, which is very important, where you're going to need a cooler and some towels. So I'm going to grab a little bite here. Oh, that's gonna be amazing. All right, I will see you in about an hour or so when we pull this thing off and go to the final stage. So, see you in a bit. Well, here we are, 4 o'clock, right on the dot, and got word from my iGrill that the internal temperature has hit our target temperature of 200 degrees. So let's take a look and see what we got going here. Oh wow, that is just swimming in juice. Oh, it is tender. Okay, so at this point, what we're going to do is we're going to take this. You can see I've got double layer of foil here. We are going to take our brisket out, put it in the foil, wrap it up completely, and this is going to be the part where you're going to need a cooler and a towel. So I got a good sized cooler here and one of my largest towels. So we're going to take this, wrap it up in foil, put it in the bottom of the cooler, and then put the towel on top of it, and then you want to let it rest for an hour and a half to 2 hours before you start slicing it up. So I'm going to do that real quick, and then don't toss the juice. I'm going to show you what you do with the juice once I get this thing into the cooler. Almost forgot to say, handling the meat. Since I said the internal temperature is 200 degrees, it's going to be really warm, so helps to have a nice pair of silicone gloves for reaching in and moving this around, because you're going to be reaching into some really hot liquid. Oh, look at that. Woo. It's actually starting to fall apart while I put it on the foil here. Whew. It's been a long 18 hours on that smoker. So I've got the brisket wrapped up in foil in the cooler, nice towel on top to let it continue to tenderize for the next hour and a half or so. So let's turn our attention to the juice. Don't toss all this out, save it, but we're going to want to separate the fat from the juice itself. So best way to do it is grab yourself a little mason jar or some other container. I'm going to do it in a little mason jar here so I can show you what's going on, and then the rest just in a pot. But go ahead and spoon this out, and then we're going to take this whole mixture. We're just going to put it in the freezer, not to let it get totally frozen over, but we're going to let the fat float to the surface, cool off, and then we're going to scrape that off, and then what's going to be left on the bottom will be straight juice full of flavor that we can pour back onto this meat when we get it cut up at the end. So I'm going to spoon this out, throw the rest in my my pot, run them both to the freezer, and those should take care of themselves well before it comes time to retrieve our brisket from the cooler and start slicing up for dinner. And while I'm doing it, I'm enjoying a nice little concoction here that does not have a name yet, but we'll show you how to make this in one of my next cocktail time videos, and we'll see if we can name this puppy. Well, while we are waiting for the meat to finish in the cooler, I have got my small mason jar of juice here. I don't know if you can see the loose juice on the bottom, and then on the top we have our little cap of fat. So all we're going to do is break up this little cap of fat and scoop it out, and we are left with just some amazing juice and broth with seasoning underneath, and that is what we will use to throw on top of the meat once it has been cut. And we'll do this to flavor, so we're not going to dump the whole thing on. I'll just reheat this, put it back on top for a little bit of extra flavor. Well, my magnificent beast of a brisket is ready, and guests should be arriving any minute now, so let's go ahead and cut into this and see where we're at. Alright, here it goes. Oh, that is looking really good. Take a look at that. Let's go ahead and slice a piece off. Now when you're cutting this, you want to make sure you cut across the grain, not with the grain, so that you end up with the muscle tissue. Oh my God, that's just falling apart. Look at that. Couldn't even get a whole piece off without it starting to just fall apart. So I'm going to continue and cutting this thing up into some nice little tender pieces of, God, look at that smoke ring right there. Look at that. See that little ring right there? Smoke ring. Continue cutting this up for my guests, and then I'm going to throw some of that juice back on here to really give it some additional flavor. So this is Jeff with Smoked Meat with Jeff. Have fun on your smoker. Don't be intimidated by a brisket. It just takes a long time. Until next time.